Hello and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, studies show that up to 80% of businesses listed for sale never close. Why is that? Well, stay tuned. Our topic today, the three questions founders should ask before selling their business. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. Exiting a business is often the culmination of years of hard work, but it's fraught with challenges. Now, according to Biz Buy Sell data, up to 80% of businesses listed for sale never close. Now, why is that? Well, it's often due to inadequate preparation, emotional attachments, or misunderstood deal terms. Now, this is the third and final episode of a three-part series that addresses the key questions business owners should ask at different stages of their journey, from securing investors, which was in episode 1, to granting equity, which is in episode 2, and now eventually selling. Today, we're going to wrap up the three questions founders should ask before selling their businesses. And joining us once again from beautiful Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is Emmanuelle Subar Litvinov. She is a partner with the Lawyer Entrepreneurs, and she is a dedicated business attorney who specializes in mergers and acquisitions, private securities offerings, equity financing, and partnership structuring. Emmanuelle, we made it all the way to episode 3. Thank you for making time for us here on the podcast again.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here again.
I told you this was going to be fun.
It's been
Did
a
I?
hoot.
Did I not? Okay, so I want to
Yeah.
mention the fact that we've done 2 episodes already. The first one
Yeah.
we did was the three questions business owners should ask before taking on an investor. And then the last one was three questions business owners should ask before granting equity from their business. You can find those on our website at www.onecapital.com/three questions PHP. So if you haven't seen those episodes yet, I encourage you to watch those, maybe even before you watch this one, just because they kind of go in order from the beginning to in the middle, where you're now in a more mature business, to now to the point where you're actually thinking about selling your business. Now, what Emmanuelle brings to the table is a strategic, solutions-oriented mindset, and she helps entrepreneurs build and protect their ventures, and she serves clients from startups to mature companies across industries like technology, manufacturing, and real estate. And we should also ask, not only is she licensed in Florida, but she's also licensed in California and lived out here in Southern California for a few years. So when a founder of a business, you look at them, they've nurtured their businesses for years, and now they're looking to sell. And they say to you, Emmanuelle, they're focused on getting it right. Oftentimes, what do you think they're talking? What are they trying to tell you?
So when founders tell me they want to get it right, it's much more than a headline number. They really want a deal that reflects the real value of what they've built, that minimizes that tax leakage and really honors their legacy. Growing up in a three-generation family business, I saw the sweat and the tears and the hard
Hmm.
work that goes into it. And so it's much more than a number at the end of the day. It's what is that value of your legacy and what you've built. Practically, that means running a process and presenting defendable financials and choosing a structure, whether that's a stock sale or an asset sale or a mix with that rollover equity or earnout that maximizes after-tax proceeds. And that structure depends on whether we're on the buy side or the sell side. I do handle both buy and sell side. It also means protecting the people if we're on that sell side, right? Also on the buy, but when you're on that sell side, you tend to think more about the people. Think that thoughtful communication with your leaders, offers for your key employees, and that transition plan that keeps your customers whole. So that great exit tends to balance the economics, the risk, the legacy, etc. So that next chapter starts clean and that you can walk away with a clean conscience.
Now, I'd like to add to that. I don't, for founders who are ready to sell their business, obviously they're often hoping for a smooth transition that aligns with their personal goals. Now, that could be retirement planning. It could be a retirement. They would maybe saying what's next, or it could be a family succession in mind. So At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I want to say this right now. The key to success here for a business owner in this position is planning. Start with the end in mind. Now, we regularly design, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Emmanuel, but we design 20-year, even 30-year plans for our clients. Now, from your point of view, how far in advance should a founder start planning the process of selling their business?
So the gold standard is to start about 18 to 36 months before you plan on selling. That window allows you to normalize EBITDA, renegotiate or exit those low value contracts, and diversify your revenue so no single customer dominates. You can refresh your corporate records in that time, again, clean up your cap table, which we talked about extensively in the last two podcasts, and button up that intellectual property ownership that we also talked upon. So operationally, you tighten those monthly closes, you implement your KPIs, and you rehearse diligence so nothing is a surprise. And that way, also, if you receive an unsolicited LOI tomorrow, you'll still be ready. But that early planning really helps you, gives you that leverage and that choice.
So you say 18 months to 3 years, and
Yes.
that's kind of like, and I would, and you could, I guess you would even say if a business owner came to you and said 3 to 18 months to 3 years would be great, but even a longer runway would even be
Oh,
better.
definitely. I mean, ideal is from day one we start talking about it and we
Exactly. I
put
was going
the,
to bring that
yes,
up.
yes, but realistically that rarely happens.
Oh,
So
like 100%.
ideal world that I can pretend that I'm currently living in, it's yes, day one that we are, you call me up on the day that you're thinking about creating a business. And I do have that conversation, even it doesn't tend to be that day one, but I do say, I always ask, what is your goal? Are you planning on bringing in investors? Are you planning on buying other companies, rolling up? Are you planning on eventually selling? If so, what's that timeline that you're looking at? And that way, everything that we do together, we can structure in such a way that meets your goals.
You're
And
always
those
thinking with the
goals,
end in mind too.
correct. And those goals can be flexible and adaptable because that is life. And you need to be, like a bridge. Even a bridge moves with water. And so you have to be adaptable and flexible, but at least everything we do can align with your goals and with what you'd like to do in the future. And quite honestly, even past that, since we're talking about selling a business, a lot of business owners, and this goes beyond the legalities, but as we've talked about, I take on a few different hats and I do want to make sure my clients are good post sale, right? So it's, have you thought about what you're going to do afterwards if you're not planning on operating a business? So actually, I haven't looked at the number in a while, but it used to be 70% of business owners regret selling their business. And it's because most of those have not thought about, what's next, have not worked with people such as yourself for what's my plan with, with the influx of funds. What do I do next? That a lot of times this business is their life, is their baby, and really planning that end in mind.
You know, about a couple months back, I started working with a business owner in Florida who is starting a business venture that is going to, they have a 20-year runway for this business. And at that time, they will be 70 years old. And so what we did was we said, okay, before we do the business plan, let's do the retirement plan.
Yeah.
So we actually did a capital forecast that takes them to age 95, believe it
Amazing.
or not. And we did it from the standpoint in today's dollars. We looked at their current expenses today, their living expenses, and then we had them blue sky, if you will, what life would look like if they were financially independent. And I said, I don't want to hear about, I can't afford this, I can't afford this. I want the dream. So we actually did it. And once we did the capital forecast, then we put together the business structure and the revenue structures for everything. And you
Amazing.
should have seen their face light up when we were all done. They were so excited and motivated because before that they were doing okay, but they didn't have a really long-term vision. But now they know exactly how much revenue they need to earn every year and how many team players they need in their business every year going forward until again they have a 20-year runway. So the planning in advance really is meaningful, like you said.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, well, every once in a while, pick up on a great idea. And I will say what really inspired me was how excited they were when we got through the
Yeah.
exercise. That was awesome. So today on today's podcast, we're discussing the three questions founders should ask before selling their business. And Manuel, let's just get right to the questions. Question number one, I've decided that it is finally time to sell my business. What steps do I have to take so my business is in order legally and financially?
Yep. So begin with that seller's readiness audit. Kind of perform due diligence on yourself before the potential buyer comes in and does so, right? So confirm your charter, your minutes, confirm your ledgers are current. Ensure that your intellectual property, especially if that's a big part of the value of your company, is actually owned by the company. So make sure you have executed founder and contractor assignments and that key contracts are signed, current, and assignable, which means there's generally assignment provisions in all agreements. If there are key contracts that you are unable to assign and you're going to have an asset purchase, that's going to be trouble. So also prepare clean financials, ideally reviewed or audited, and then reconcile any AR, AP, inventory, tax filings. Tax issues are huge also, so take care of any outstanding taxes. To document your HR policies, your benefits, workers' classifications. Is there any misclassifications? Clear any liens or disputes now. And then assemble, well, not and then, it should be very first actually, assemble your advisors of your M&A counsel. Are you working with an accountant, a tax strategist, an investment banker, wealth advisors, and create this secure data room so diligence moves much quicker. As I've mentioned before, slowing down deals kills deals.
You know, I got you prompted more than one question. I got to warn you right now. The first thing that you brought up that kind of jumped out at me was the team of advisors they have in place or maybe don't have in place. You're coming in as a trusted advisor, obviously. Uh, do you ever find yourself in a position where you discovered that I'm thinking, and not to attack them because I have many friends who are CPAs, but do you ever find situations where the people they have, sort of the bookkeepers, the tax advisors, or the CPAs have kind of they're no longer really set for the job at hand. They've moved, the company is built up so much that the people that's doing their tax planning really don't have the skill or expertise anymore. You ever find yourself in a position where you got to go to your client and say, we need to upgrade here before we sell?
Very much so. And there's a quote that's the person that takes you from zero to 500,000 is not the same person oftentimes that will take you to 5 million. And that is with employees, and sometimes that is with these advisors. And if you're dealing with smaller shops, I love small shops for a lot of clients, but sometimes you do need somebody with a bigger mindset, not necessarily a bigger firm, but that bigger mindset who's capable of, and that's why I said keyword tax strategist
Right.
because oftentimes people tell me, clients tell me, and huge mid-market companies will tell me sometimes, oh, I have an accountant, I'm dealing with them. I'm like, okay, but do they strategize with you about your taxes? Do they come to you proactively to find ways to reduce your tax liability and exposure? If not, that person isn't necessarily working for you, right? Because that person should be coming to you proactively. Have you received a call since the OBA passed? Have you received a call of, hey, let's potentially do XYZ? And if not, then maybe that person's a great fit and maybe there's a reason why. If not, maybe it's time to look for that additional individual. And I'm more than happy to assist with that, depending on the right fit, depending on your industry. I'm happy to make those connections. And I don't get anything out of those connections. I will say that I don't take anything
Yeah,
from those connections.
exactly.
I do it because my client's interest is in my best interests.
I agree with you 100% and well said. And I will add to that. Um, you know, Emmanuel doesn't have I guess I'll rephrase it. Emmanuel has a very deep bench of subject matter expert relationships, and she could be an incredible resource for any business owner who is like wondering about, do I have the expertise at hand here that I need? And if they don't, well, you could be a great resource, no doubt. Just one of my favorite sayings is ignorance is bliss and the mother of adventure.
Hmm.
And with that, what are some of the common oversights that you see founders make when they're preparing their business for sale? Just, the I didn't know that conversation, and how can they address them early enough that they can boost the valuation and attract buyers? Because I'm sure you get a lot of I didn't know that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
Yeah, well, we've touched upon a lot of them in a sense, but the fixable oversights, the easiest ones, those commingled expenses that blur the margins, the
Oh,
contract, yeah, the contractor related intellectual property without assignments is huge. Auto renewable contracts that are not assignable, that's going to be such a headache if you're in an asset purchase and your value is your assets. And then those 1099 relationships that look like W-2 employment, especially if you're in a state like California or New York. So separate your personal expenses, get those invention and intellectual property assignments executed, add assignment or consent rights to key contracts, any month-to-month key employee or excuse me, key customer contracts, get those into secure longer-term contracts, and then clean up your classifications. And do all of this before the buyers look, because each unresolved item becomes a discount or a retrade.
well, again, we're being joined here today by Emmanuelle Subar Litvinov. She is a Fort Lauderdale-based business attorney, and really glad that you could make time for us today, Emmanuelle. And we're asking the three questions founders should ask before they sell their business. And I love this second question. So can't wait to hear how you address this. So here we go. The question that keeps me up at night: what do I actually want from the sale of my business? I'm sure you get that one from time to time from clients. They're thinking to themselves, what am I trying to get out of this here?
Yeah. And you know what? That question tends to be asked at least a handful of times what is actually important to you? What is your best case scenario? What is your worst case scenario, right? Clarity prevents regret. So ask, do I want maximum cash at close? Is that all that's important to me? Or am I comfortable with some rollover equity for potential upside? Do I want to stay 6 to 24 months? Do I want to consult only? Or do I
Hmm.
just want exit at close and go on my merry way? What guardrails do I also need in place for employees, for those key employees? Is there anybody that I want to make sure, is fully taken care of? Or am I okay with just saying, see you later, guys, enjoy, I've done my part? And some people are like that, and that's fully okay, both ends. But then what guardrails do you need for your brand, right? So once you define those, we'll help target the right buyers, whether it's strategic versus financial, et cetera. We'll structure the deal, whether that's the cash, the earnout, the rollover, and the covenants to protect what really matters.
Well, I think there's good news here. I think we can safely say that founders can align their personal goals with the sales structure to avoid what we'll call a post-sale regret. Now, whether it's financial independence, continuing involvement, or legacy preparation, again, I will say a good place to start with this whole exercise, and I talked about it a bit earlier, is determining their personal cash flow needs going forward. So again, let's not just blindly move off into the sunset, because that could, in fact, when I think about it, I think about, the negotiating earnouts. It could be an example of understanding what the cash flow is going to be looking like. And it may be that, you're going to get 80% up front and 20% could be on earnout. That could affect the way you think about the sale of your business and how long you want to stay around,
Right
because
back then.
you want to protect that 20% on the earnout, because that could be contingent on retention of clients, right? And you get your 80% maybe over a couple, 3 years, but the earnout may trail on a little bit longer than that.
Yeah,
And
and you might not get the full earnout. Earnout are often
yeah,
tied
well, if you leave
to milestones, to if
immediately,
you leave early, etc. So that's
exactly.
not that's not slam dunk money in your
That's a
pocket.
conversation that you have to have with the client saying, listen, they're
Correct.
going to give you a nice chunk up front, but the other 20% you're going to have to wait for. So then because they may come to you and say, well, I kind of want to go.
Correct. And on
Well,
a lot of deals, I like to ask, do you have somebody such as yourself, such as Wayne? Because when you do get that influx of cash, those life goals need to be translated into that deal math and do exactly what you did with your clients. You start with that, cash flow plan, your lifestyle, your taxes, debt. Do you still have kids in college? Then you back into the net proceeds that you need, and that becomes your floor and guides your choices, like how much to roll over, like whether that earnout risk is worth it, and how large that escrow can be. So I do love working with, the other advisors and just making sure it's so vital that your advisors are on the same page and communicating. If they're not, if they don't know each other exists, your advisors are not working for you. It's not going to be
It's
cohesive
a
and collaborative.
transaction-based relationship, Emmanuel,
Correct.
and those are the
Correct.
worst kind as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Yeah. So again, back to my old saying, those who fail to plan, plan to fail. So the good news I say again is that you can make this work.
Yeah.
And this is where working with a collaborative team, the tax advisors, the business attorney who's helping on the deal, talking to a financial advisor who actually does financial planning, not selling investments like as a broker, but actual someone who does actual due diligence analysis and capital forecasting. That can affect the outcome. But again, the good news is you can have a good outcome with a fair amount of planning. Okay, let's move on to question number three, Emmanuel. And this is an important one. I think it almost ties back into the second question. Do I fully understand the terms of the deal I'm agreeing to? I wonder how many times you've had the conversation with somebody saying, I really didn't understand what I signed. That's a horrifying thought, but at any level, for anything.
Very much so. And understanding the terms is as important, if not more important, as price, as that purchase price. So let's talk about earnouts. Those are very often tied to future payment. Excuse me. Earnouts are very often tie future payments to performance.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how are those metrics defined and measured, and who controls them? There's back and forth between the two councils about those definitions, right? Working capital adjustments, true up, cash at closing. What's the target and peg period? That tends to be a piece that's negotiated. Escrow and indemnities protect buyers. So, you have to figure out what are the caps, the baskets, and the survival periods. And then is there a non-compete that really limits your next chapter if you're not just planning on retiring? What's that scope and duration? What are you really limited in doing? So we translate each clause into kind of dollars, time, and risk so that you know exactly what you're accepting. And then I will go over it with you almost ad nauseam to make sure that you know and understand exactly what you're signing. And not just you understand, but once again, we'll revisit your goals and your vision and your alignment and make sure that it aligns with each of those.
I always try to look at things pragmatically, and I always try to say, what's worst case scenario?
Yeah.
And so, just as a follow-up to that, the red flags is what I try to think of. What are the red flags a founder should be watching, when it comes to deal terms? And I think about the non-competes or the indemnity provisions. And again, I'll go back to earnouts. And how can they negotiate them effectively? Obviously using your assistance would be ideal. Like those are the things that I think they need to think about in advance before they sign off on a deal.
Yes, definitely. And you touched upon some very good ones. And so those non-competes, especially if they sprawl across geographies or if the industry is defined in more of a broad base than it should be. And then other red flags include that in unlimited indemnities or very long survival periods. Earnouts, if those are based on vague KPIs or has a lot of buyer controlled inputs that doesn't allow you to do your thing, then that's a red flag. So we negotiate these caps and baskets, objective metrics with audit rights, and then kind of a reasonable scope and term for those restrictive covenants. And then where appropriate, what's been much more common over the last few years is representation and warranty and insurance to reduce that escrow size and that post-close exposure.
So as we include, I can't believe we're coming to the end of this.
I know, right?
Um, our three-part series on questions for business owners from investors and equity to selling. Uh, what's the one unifying piece of advice that you'd give to an entrepreneur to navigate these stages with some confidence and helping them build a legacy? Like, what would be the overarching thought from you?
Across everything, the through line is intentionality.
Hmm.
So make every move serve the end that you want.
So I will go back to what we said earlier about the planning. And remember, I
Yeah.
asked you, what's the timeline in advance of thinking about selling the business when they should start talking? You said, well, the gold standard is 18 months to 3 years. And
Yeah.
I think we know that the real answer is when you start a business, maybe it's a good idea to start with what it's going to look like when you sell it. Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah. So I like to say operate like a buyer is always watching you.
Yeah.
Type and write things like it will always end up in court, right? Never put anything in writing that you don't want a judge to read. Operate like a buyer is always watching you, and you'll maximize optionality to either sell,
Mhm.
scale, or pass it on your terms.
We talked about this before a couple of times. I want to bring it up again just before we let
Sure.
you go. Looking off into the future. We always kind of look rear view mirror, but looking off into the future, how do you see the evolving trends like AI integration, and I would even bring up, the the term economic uncertainty, which I'm telling you, I've been in financial services industry going back to the 1990s. I've never, ever, ever been in a period where it wasn't described as economic uncertainty, even when the S&P 500 has been up 20% a year for 2 years or 3 years in a row. But from the standpoint of influencing business exits in Florida's market, what should founders start to prepare for now?
So look, buyers prize durable cash flow, data discipline, and technology leverage. In
Hmm.
Florida, companies that use automation and AI to improve those unit economics and lock in those recurring or contracted revenue, because that's extremely valuable, and then run with well-documented processes, earn premiums. So given that, uncertainty, show resilience, show your scenario plans, your covenant-ready financials, and your staffing supply plan. Again, what really commands attention and your purchase price, regardless of cycle, is that intentionality.
Interesting. So again, one last time I'm going to make this comment. Folks have been watching us on our website. Those who are doing that, they're seeing all your contact information on the screen. But again, we have lots of folks listening on Apple and Spotify. And for those folks, if they want to reach out to you after listening to these three episodes, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Sure. So you can reach me on LinkedIn. My name is Emmanuelle Subar Litvinov. Also throw into Google the Entrepreneur Lawyers. I'm a partner there. Phone number is 305-686-5159. Our website is theentrepreneurlawyers.com. And my email is elitvinov@tels.legal.
Perfect. Emmanuel, when we first started talking about this, I said to you, this is going to be fun. And I don't know if you were
That was an understatement.
uh, at the time, I don't know if you were entirely convinced of that, but I will say this has been awesome. I've had a lot of fun putting these together with you, the episodes and the conversation. And needless to say, I look forward to, maintaining contact with you, of course. And that
Of
goes
course.
without saying, but I just want to thank you so much for making yourself available for this. And as my friend Don would say, more shall be revealed.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again so much for having me, Wayne.
I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification of when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.